out. So, today's the day to do it. And so we're going to have a Bible study. Aren't you glad? No sermon today from me. The Bible. We're going to get into the Bible. See what the Bible has to say. Because the Bible is the source of what we believe. Of course, Christ is the foundation, but the Bible is the source of where we get his thought and leadership. Guidance. Oh, no. Yeah, well, there are three basic methods of studying Bible prophecy. And these are the three. The first one is called historicism. Historicism. And what historicism is symbolism is used to encourage the study of Scripture to interpret Bible prophecy. In other words, historicism goes way back. In fact, it goes way back to the time of Christ. It goes way back to the time of Abraham. Historicism, the method of interpreting Bible prophecy, is there. But this is not the popular one today. There's a second method of Bible interpretation, and this isn't so popular today either, but it is around. It's called preterism. And preterism comes from the foundation, or comes from the thought that all Bible prophecy was fulfilled in the days of the early church. And there are even Christians that believe that. So Bible prophecy has no relevancy to us today. I think of the Church of Christ. Anybody familiar with the Church of Christ? Yeah. There's some around, or a Christian church, they call themselves. That's a group of people who are preterists. The third one, and this is the most popular today, preterism is the least popular, or maybe one of the popular. But the next one is futurism. And this is rampant everywhere. Everybody, I can't say everybody, the majority of Christianity believes this, in futurism. And they're saying that the book of Revelation is in the future. It has relevancy to the future. Doesn't apply to us maybe today unless we are at the last generation. And so you hear, since 2 weeks ago today, when Israel was invaded or attacked by Hamas, you hear more on the internet and YouTube people who are preaching futurism, saying, oh, we're there, it's going to happen. Israel has a role in end-time events. Now, I can say Israel has a role in end-time events. But the Bible talks about two Israels. There's the nation of Israel, and then there's spiritual Israel. And the one that Paul emphasizes in his scriptures, in the New Testament, is spiritual Israel. If you go to Revelation or Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, you'll see there very clearly that Paul says there's an olive tree, and a branch is taken out of that olive tree, and another one is grafted into the olive tree. So Israel of old has been taken out because they didn't accept Christ as their Savior, as the Messiah, although there are some today that have done that. And the Christian church has been plugged in to the olive tree. So the method of understanding Bible prophecy is just simply the same method that was used during the Reformation. The Reformation, 1500s, 1400s. I wasn't there, but I can easily say, do you remember that? Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Knox of Scotland, William Tyndale of England. He translated the Bible from the Greek to the English version. John Wesley, he was the founder of the Methodist Church. All these people were historicists in their interpretation of Bible prophecy. It's clear. Futurism didn't come into play until the late 1800s and early 1900s. And today it's gone just scattered all over. A lot of people believe it. So, the method that we use is historicism. And that's taking the Bible, and that's seeing the symbolism that's in the Bible, and then comparing it with other scriptures, and then looking in history and seeing how do these things come about, and then it makes sense, and it all becomes plain. Again, Adventists are about the only ones today that I know of who take the interpretation of historicism to show prophecy in the Bible, especially the book of Revelation. Where did the others come from? Well, the Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation was when Martin Luther was and John Calvin and John Knox were pointing their finger at the Church of Rome and saying, you know, this church needs to reform, we need to know more about the Bible, know about Christ. The Catholics had the Bible in their churches, but it was chained to the wall. Why? Why didn't they want people to read it? Because they didn't want them to get the truth. Why? Yeah, I look bad for them, but there's not something else that goes along with it. Good car, what else? Exactly, yeah. But there's more. The desire was to keep people from, like you say, branching off and doing their own thing, keeping everybody in the same frame of mind. God doesn't work that way. He gave us a mind to think, to rationale, and to do. But the church wanted it, we all have to be in line and lockstep and go forward. Okay? So, during the Reformation, the Catholic Church organized a body of priests to be defenders of the papal Rome. And we call those priests today, this body of group of leaders, we call them Jesuits. They had their founding in the beginning of, or with the Roman Church during the Reformation. And they are the ones that developed both preterism in the early 1600s and futurism in the mid-1500s, about 50 years apart. And where is most Christianity going today? Futurism. Do they know that? No. No, they don't know that. But it's in history. It's all there. So we have to go to the Bible and see where America stands and what it's all about. And we have to do that by going back to the book of Revelation, book of Daniel, because Daniel and Revelation are two books that combine. They go together. And in Daniel chapter 2, we have this dream that the king of Babylon had. He had this dream about an image. Head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay. This is his vision that he had. Bring this over. And the king was really upset because he called his followers or his priests to come forward and to tell him what the meaning of the dream was. They couldn't do it. So someone told him about Daniel, and Daniel actually spoke up and said, hey, I can tell the vision of the dream. And so him and his three companions prayed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they prayed that God would give Daniel an understanding of this dream. And God did. So the next day, Daniel went before the king and told him, this is what the dream means. The head of gold is symbolic of Babylon. And then you have Persia, which is going to come next. You have Greece, thighs of bronze. And you have Rome, the legs of iron and clay, or iron. And then the feet is a divided Europe, or divided Roman Empire, if you will, of feet of iron and clay. And where we are today are in the toes of the iron and clay feet. All of this came about. And the Bible even says there in Daniel that the two will not cling together. Iron and clay doesn't mix together. You can take a handful of iron and a handful of clay, put it together. How long is it going to hold out? Not very long. It's going to fall apart. And what's happening in Rome? I mean, what's happening in Europe today? There's not a lot of unity there. You know, the Brexit, England, and the European Union, people want to get out of it. Nations want to get out of it, and England's one of them. So, we go on. That gives us the foundation. And that's Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 7, there's another dream. And Daniel shared this vision. And in this dream, he sees four animals, four creatures coming up out of the sea. And the sea is important. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, maybe about 5. There's the lion comes up, the leopard comes up, the bear comes up, and then there's a nondescript beast. That's up here. Right here. Nondescript beast. 10 horns. And then as he looks at these horns, he sees that there's a horn that comes up between them. And that's what we're talking about a little bit. But these beasts of Daniel 7 and the image of Daniel 2 coincide. They're together. There's one means the other. Head of gold is the lion. Chest and arms of silver is the bear. Belly and thighs of brass is the leopard. And the nondescript beast, the dragon, if you will, is Rome. And did that happen in history? Sure, you go back to history and you see it falls right in line with that. There can be no mistake. And then Rome is divided by those 10 horns that come up. And if you remember the prophecy, 3 of those horns are uprooted by one mighty horn that is pompous and not very nice. So the beasts represent nation. Nation. And then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea. This is Revelation now, chapter 13 and verse 1. So now we're in the book of Revelation, and this is where we're going to find this stuff come together. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, and his crowns, and on his horns 10 crowns. Now, what do the waters represent here? Well, here's the definition right in the Bible, Revelation chapter 17 and verse 15. The waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So what are these? What does the waters represent? People, nations, tongues. Yeah, people. Bunches of people. Okay? Why is water used as a symbol of nation? Why isn't it ground? Because people are as unpredictable as the sea. Okay? And that's why they're shifting all the time, you know. So, Daniel 7, back to Daniel 7 again. Thus he said, the 4th beast, and that's Rome, remember, shall be a 4th kingdom on the earth. Then he said to me, and this is Revelation 17, the waters which are people, who never saw that? Oh, okay. When a nation or ancient kingdom plays a significant part in the fulfillment of God's purposes, that empire is described in the Bible by the Bible prophets. That's what this beast is. And who does this beast, this is Revelation 13 now, who does this beast represent? Rome. And we know that because the same terminology that's used for the nondescript beast, or the dragon that's over in Daniel 7, corresponds with the description of this beast in Revelation 13. Then I stood, and this is Revelation 13, verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 means completeness, the 10 means all around, universal. And on his head, on his horns, 10 crowns, and on his head, a blasphemous name. This is the same terminology we're finding in Daniel chapter 7. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. Now, if you remember, we talked a little bit ago that there's a similarity between this beast here and the 3 other beasts that came up out of the water. You have a lion, which is symbolic of Babylon. You do that. And you have the feet of the bear, okay? And all combined in the likeness of a leopard. So these are the composite figures that we see in Daniel chapter 7 coming up out of the sea, all composed into one beast. Following? And I saw one of its heads as if it had a deadly wound. Now, he's seeing something that has a deadly wound, but the wound is not fatal. And his deadly wound was healed. And that tells us right there, verse 3, Revelation 13. And all the world wandered after the beast. All the world wondered and were amazed at what this beast was doing. So, if we're comparing this with Daniel, we're seeing that this beast is a system that has been present for a while. It was granted to him, this beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. We saw that in Daniel chapter 7. The little horn power that came up. But then this, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies And he was given authority to continue for how long? 42 months. 42 months times 30, and in the calendar of the ancients, it would be 30 days to a month, and they'd have 4 or 5 days extra each year to do festival. So 42 months times 30 days in the month would be how long? 1,260 years. And that's the same time. The first place we find this, anyway, this is 42 months, but the first place we find this in Scripture is in Daniel. This 1,260-year period, or 42 months, if you will, is over in Daniel 7, verse 25. And he shall speak pompous words against the Most High. Same thing we're reading in Revelation. It makes sense? Same thing in Revelation. Against the Most High. Shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for a time, times, and a half a time. Time, times, and a half a time is how long? A time is 1 year, 360 days. There's only 360 days in the Jewish calendar. 1 year. Time, times, that's 2. So that would be 740? You add these up and it'll come out to 1,260 days. Time, 360. Times, that's 2 of them, that would be 720. Half a time would be half of 360, which would be 180. You add those numbers together and it brings you up to the same number, 1,265. Now identifying this power is what we're going to go into next. This power comes from Rome. You follow it? It comes from Rome. Persecutes the saints, thinks to change times and law, God's law, and he will reign for 42 months or 1,260 years. Why do we take 1,260 years? Because in the book of Numbers, chapter 14 and verse 34, God says 1 day equals 1 year. It's also over in Ezekiel chapter 4 verse 8. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. So 1 day equals 1 year. This is the prophecies of the historicism. Make sense? Historicism is making this come to life. And it tells us who this is and what this entity is. So, 1 prophetic day equals 1 year or 1,260 years. This power that came up out of the sea in Revelation and also in the little horn, 1,260 years, it can't be just a nation that's necessarily came and went. It has to be something that's been there for long. This can only apply to one power. And that one power that this applies to is the Church of Rome. You remember this Church of Rome was given the prophecy, or it says there that it would reign. It would receive a deadly wound. One of its heads would receive a deadly wound, but the deadly wound would be healed. This deadly wound went into effect in the year 538. Well, what happened in 538? The Code of Justinian, you can read this in history books, encyclopedias, the Code of Justinian, which put all the Christian churches under the authority of the Bishop of Rome. Why? Because the churches in 538 were arguing with each other. They were bickering with each other. They were arguing and fighting, and they couldn't get along. So Justinian, who was an emperor of Rome, and his Roman authority was in Constantinople in Turkey, which later became known as Istanbul. But it was Constantinople, named after the emperor Constantine, because he moved his throne from Rome to Constantinople. Okay? So he wrote this law, the Code of Justinian, that all the churches would come under the authority of the Bishop of Rome in 536. But it didn't come about until 538, because Rome was under siege by the Ostrogoths. And it couldn't come about until the Ostrogoths were taken care of, those 3 horns that were uprooted. We didn't talk about it here, but it's in the Bible. And they found their deliverance when Berthier, the emperor, sent generals to Constantinople to break the siege, not Constantinople, to Rome to break the siege. And that happened in 538. So the church did not come under the authority of the Bishop of Rome until the year 538. Now you come down from 538, add 1,260 years to the year 538, what do you come out with? You come out with 1798. So this beast can be only one power. It turns out that Napoleon, who was general he wasn't quite the emperor yet, but he was still a general in the French Revolution. That's a whole study by itself, the French Revolution. Fascinating. Fascinating. Anyway, he had brothers in Italy. And his brother's land was confiscated by the Pope of Rome. And they didn't like that, so they complained to Napoleon, and Napoleon sent his general into the Vatican to take the Pope captive. And a lot of people thought that Catholicism was done. But remember the prophecy says the deadly wound would be healed. That happened in 1798. The deadly wound would be healed. And lo and behold, in the 1920s, the emperor, the leader of Italy, actually gave to the Catholic Church land, 68 acres again. So now the Vatican is a separate state from Italy. It's independent. During World War II, they would hide Jews in the Vatican, and the Germans couldn't go in to take it because it was a separate neutral country. They have their own police force. They have their own finances. They have their own what's the word I want? Postal system. They have their own stamps. Today, that's the case. Anybody been to Rome? No, I've been there. I've been through the Vatican Museum. It's fascinating. My, it's fascinating. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But the Vatican is not St. Peter's Cathedral. It's the land around St. Peter's Cathedral. And that's all the Vatican. Does the Bible mention the United States in prophecy? Well, we go on to this prophecy. We're still here in Revelation chapter 13. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. And that's what happened with the confiscation of the Pope of Rome going into captivity. 538 AD to 1798 is 1,260 years, right on the bottom. Revelation continues. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. The deadly wound would be healed. And this deadly wound happened in the 1920s when Mussolini and Caspiar, was the bishop in Rome, signed a historic Roman pact, and that's when they gave the town or made the Vatican the Vatican. So the Roman Church has its own country, 958 acres. But then the prophecy goes on. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Now this first beast in Revelation is coming up out of what? The sea, which is symbolic of peoples and nations and turmoil and so forth. Okay? That's the first beast. And that first beast is Rome. The second beast that comes up out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. Now these are in contrast. In the Bible, in Revelation chapter 12, we see that the dragon is who? Satan. And we see the lamb is who? Jesus. So there's a conflict of interest in this beast that comes up around 1798. There's a conflict of interest. And we see that in our history of America, don't we? How do we treat the indigenous people in America? How do we treat the slaves prior to the Civil War? But we also see good that was there. The kindness. This is the only country, the first country that had a constitution following the principles of the Bible. Free elections. Free assembly. We have these special rights that one day, well, we'll see. I don't need to say anything about that. So, this new beast comes up out of the earth, or a sparsely populated area. All the other beasts came up out of the water. This is the only one that comes up out of the earth. A sparsely populated area. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. He did that. Horns are symbolic of power. They indicate that this beast derives grafted power from political and religious freedom. We don't, not to be dictated to today. We have political freedom, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship. What does this beast do? The absence of crowns indicates that there's freedom. It's not a dictatorial rule by a king or a queen. There's no royalty here. You know, when George Washington took the oath of office, and they decided to have a leader. They called him a president and not a king, intentionally, so we wouldn't have the royal lineage. Emerging amid, Daniel Revelation, he says this, emerging amid the silence of the earth, adding daily to its power and strength. He's talking about the United States here. So it's a lamb-like beast, arising around 1798, arising in the relatively unpopulated area, no crowns on its head. It would be a young nation. It would rise to a position of worldwide power and influence. And we'll see that in the prophecy as we go on. What is the only nation that fits this description? There's only one. Only one, and that's the United States of America. Now, don't misunderstand me. I love this country. This is the greatest country in my view, even today, on God's green earth. The greatest country that was brought forth. How does any nation speak? Well, it speaks through its legislation, by laws. And now, there are three, I don't want to get into this, Dave. I want to get into it a little bit more next time, but maybe let me just say this. There are three law entities in our country, federally I'm talking about, right? Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Am I right? There's three. They make laws. And more recently, the laws of the President is moving forward. I don't know. Anyway, does the book of Revelation describe the events that will lead up to this erosion of religious liberty, this union of church and state? Yeah, we read this here in verse 12. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. Who's the first beast? The Church of Rome. And this country will exercise all the authority, according to Scripture, according to John, according to the Holy Spirit, of the first beast in his presence. And causes the earth and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. The wound is healed since the 1920s. We're living in ominous times. Exciting. Talk about that. And it's the union of church and state, where church and state comes together, merges together. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Well, some people suggest that that was the atomic bomb used in World War II in Japan. Could be, but it could also be something that will happen in the future, showing the authority that this person that comes to the throne or comes to the power of this country will have, raise people from the dead, to call fire down from heaven, just like Elijah. And people have to be aware of this. That's why God raised us up, called us as the Seventh Adventist Church, a movement. We're not just a church. We're a people that reach out to the world and say, this is what's going to happen. Jesus is coming soon. Get ready. Make decisions to fall in line with him and we'll be saved. Verse 14. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. It's interesting. It mentions it 2 or 3 times here in this chapter, Revelation 13. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. This country is moving in an area that's going to persecute, just like the Roman Church did in the Dark Ages. And how many people in this country are aware of that? Very, very few. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. Now, what most Christianity says is saying that this man is going to come in the future. Anybody hear of a woman by the name of Jean Dixon? Have you? Jean Dixon? Jean Dixon was alive in the 70s, I think she 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s and 70s. And she said that there was somebody born in the Middle East. I'm not saying she's a prophet, but she claimed to be a prophet. She was only about 30 or 40% right in her prophecies. And she was alive when I was growing up. And she's dead now, she died. And she said there's a man that was born, somebody was born in the 1950s who's alive in her day, who would be the beast, the leader of the world. And that's interesting. And we don't think of Jean Dixon today, at least I don't. He causes all, both small and great, rich and free, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the beast, the number of the beast, or the number of his name. This beast, power, has authority. Now, I don't think it's just a coincidence that we saw COVID-19 come a few years ago. Okay? And I'm not here to say you need to get your shot or you don't need to get your shot. That's not my purpose here. I don't care. You do what you want to do. But when the authority of the United States came down on the side of closing churches, this church was closed, wasn't it? Wasn't Pittsburg church closed? Was Pittsburg church closed? Yeah, how long? Yeah. How long were you closed? Oh, unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I was in the Rocky Mountain Conference at the time. I was in Farmington, New Mexico, and they closed the churches down. They said you need to close the churches down. I wanted to be defiant because we have a law that says a constitutional right to have our churches open. But I got thinking about it. What if COVID-19 started in our church, or it spread throughout our church? That wouldn't be very good PR. So I said, oh, okay. And it was only for a month and a half that the church was closed. Mid-February, mid-March, all of April, and I think all of May. But in May, the conference said, okay, you can open them again with these rules and regulations. And we had to post them everywhere and so forth. We did it. We opened up. Our attendance was smaller. Well, what right does the government say in this country you can't do it? But they did, and how many people followed them? I think there were some churches. I think Doug Batchelor kept his church open. I don't know what happened. I was pastor at Albuquerque, New Mexico for a while, and I talked to them down there. And they were afraid to open because they knew that the state of New Mexico was sending out, I don't want to say spies, but seers maybe, to go into the churches and say, oh, you're open today. In Missouri, you may have heard of this, there was a church that had people sit in their cars, windows were rolled up, and they got fined. I guess the pastor and his crew went to jail or something. It's crazy. It's crazy. And why did people do it? Why did we follow? Why did we follow blindly what the state and government was saying? Why? Because we didn't want to be infecting anybody else, but we wanted to be like everybody else. We wanted to be in harmony with the leadership. Crazy. But look at this. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, everybody, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. The right hand indicates that I'm going along with it just because it's something I got to do to make friends or whatever. On the forehead says you're convinced that's it. That's it. This is true. We'll talk about the mark of the beast when I'm here again in 2 weeks. And that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. How's our society doing today? Anybody hear of Francis Schaeffer? Francis Schaeffer? Fred and I have. He became popular in the mid-70s, early 70s, with a book that he wrote called How Then Shall We Live? He's an American theologian, philosopher, if you will, but he came out with this book, and the book is pointing to the different societies. In fact, you can find it on the internet, on YouTube. I wasn't looking for it, but it just popped up, which was good. That he had done, he did 8 series on different times in world history when the countries, empires, governments collapse. And the first one is dealing with Rome. And he brings out these things. Why governments collapse, why countries collapse. Social problems. Common today. Drugs. Huh? Another one, common today. Sexual immorality. Common today. Economic uncertainty. Common today. Rising crime. Hey, let's defund the police. No, it's not. And natural disasters. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things led to the demise of the Roman Empire. Now, it took some time for it to finally, but it wasn't an outside army that came and destroyed them. They destroyed themselves by indulging in these different things. And the same thing is happening to America today. We see it more today than we did 5 years ago. And all because of COVID. We want, well. So, what force or power will help to turn this nation into a persecuting beast? Have you given any thought to that? Yeah, what is it? Yeah. Do you know, I'm off the cuff here. Do you know that the government has in place a policy that Congress passed several years ago, that if the Congress should cease to exist, a bomb goes off in Congress and they're all dead, that the president will take charge of the government. That all goes into his lap. The government, it needed to happen. And why did it need to happen? Because we live in a human world that is a rebellion against God. And death is prominent, and people are crazy. What force or power will help to turn this nation into a persecuting beast? Have you ever heard of the Christian right? What is the Christian right? It is a religious coalition with political aims that is mainly comprised of evangelicals, of conservative Catholics, and Protestants. It also sometimes attracts the support of politically conservative Mormons and Jewish groups. I mean, you see a union there, don't you? I'm going to talk about this in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today. How they're moving in and taking over. The agenda of the Christian right can be summed up essentially as promoting the idea of a Christian nationalism in which the establishment of Judeo-Christian values is the foundation of the country's law. Amazing! That's the Christian right. And there are probably some Adventists that are into it too. But we need to be careful, because the laws that they want to enforce are not necessarily biblical laws. So, he causes all, both small and great, rich and free, poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their forehead, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the beast, the number of his name, or on the forehead of his name. We're living in awesome times, and we're seeing this being fulfilled before us, before our very eyes. So next week, 2 weeks from today, I'm going to talk about the dreaded mark of the beast, and what the Christian right is doing and bringing it along, and how the desire is for American unity. Going back to the time when things were more settled, more peaceful. Going back to the time of Andy Griffith, right? Leave It to Beaver. Going back to the time when things are peachy keen. But we're still dealing with the humans who are power hungry. They want control. They want authority. And they'll do anything they can do to get it. What a day to be alive. I'll tell you folks, Jesus is coming soon. So let's take our hymn books and turn to our hymn number 214. Hymn number 214.